The United Nations Secretary General, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, is credited with the statement that climate change is affecting every aspect of society, from the health of the global economy to the health of our children. It is about the water in our wells and in our taps. It is about the food on the table. It is at the core of nearly all the major challenges we face today. Now, that statement underscores the fact that climate change has undeniable impacts on human and social development. It's our belief here too that knowledge is critical, and the capacity to use knowledge to inform, plan for and respond to climate change must be increased. What then is climate change? Climate change is the variation the whole world is currently experiencing in terms of more frequent occurrences of climate extremes, such as excruciating sunshines, drought and heat waves, the very heavy rainfalls and the melting of the glaciers, leading to rising water levels and floods. It is the totality of human activities at the industrial and technological development leading to burning of fossil fuels, which in turn increases the carbon emissions and greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. It is about our poor land management, agricultural activities and farm practices that reduces our forests and sometimes other human commercial activities of lumbering for timber and fuelwood and more. So you see, climate variability and change has been brought about largely by human existence and development. It is the result of how human beings have debased the environment in the process of advancement, and you and I, indeed the whole world, are all guilty of bringing it about. Climate change is irreversible. In fact, it is already here with us, with such disastrous consequences as we are already suffering, such as declining agricultural productivity and threat to food security, floods and coastal erosions, loss of biodiversity, increasing water scarcity and outright famine, land degradation and desertification. Happily, however, we can begin to do some things to cope with the impact of climate change. These include urgent proper actions at effective adaptations and mitigation strategies. Now, it is the full understanding of the phenomena of climate variability and change and its implications that is the interrelationship between climate change and socio-economic activities of agriculture, energy, industry, trade, finance, gender, population growth, and other social development, including science, technology and innovations, and what we must begin to do to enable us cope with the impacts of climate change at international, national, state, local, community group and individual levels that this series seeks to bring to you in the ensuing weeks ahead. Welcome to our warming world, going beyond green. My name is Stephen Lawson. I am your anchor. Today on the program, in the first of a two-part introductory episodes, we are going to feature reports on the effects of climate change on our lives and our livelihood, and how by our own very activities of seeking livelihood and sustenance, we are increasing the scope, impact and frequency of climate variability and change in our society. We begin with this report on the effects of climate change on agricultural productivity and food insecurity.
It has been established that only 4% of African land is irrigated, while the great majority of farmers practice rain-fed subsistence farming. Climate change has disastrous consequences for our agriculture because unpredictable rainfall patterns are lowering agricultural productivity and contributing to food shortages, thereby heightening the threat of food insecurity and, in some cases, famine.
Given the kind of situation we're experiencing now, in which the rains don't come when we expect, we can't plan our season and everything like we used to, what we should do now is to go back to the books, to go back into research.
When you cut down forests, you are inadvertently reducing rainfall. There's a very strong connection, very strong nexus between the two. In fact, much more. I mean, you increase the soil albedo, you increase what they call it, so many other things, so that at the end of the day you have less rainfall. And here we are almost, agriculture is contingent on rainfall, so it's a big problem for us.
Although the United Nations Development Programme (UNDP) affirms that Nigeria doubled its food production between 2001 and 2007, our farming practices of shifting cultivation, which brings new areas under cultivation, as a means of improving agricultural productivity, poor land management, soil degradation, absence of productive technologies, and climatic uncertainties are just some of the reasons that our agriculture is at risk of decline.
The basic one we have is the shifting cultivation and the bush burning specifically. I think they call it the slash and burn, where you want to create a new farms, and the next thing you do is that you destroy a lot of forest just to be able to get a farm. It's very, very what do you call it? It's very, very disastrous. For the climate system.
Deforestation, whether for the purpose of farming or indeed for such other economic reasons as timbering or fuel wood, is another major problem. A preservation of our forest, therefore, is seen as a major source of funding, as it contributes substantially to reducing greenhouse gas emissions.
There is something that is referred to as Red Plus under the UNFCCC, which is a mechanism that is being used to quantify, the numbers of forests that is available, in each country, and to see where funding can be made available, through this Red Plus, to different nations. And I know for sure that Nigeria is already trying to get some funding.
We know the role the forests play in the ecosystem and the balance they help us achieve. So we will not think, while we think globally that, well, on the global scale our contribution is rather small, and we are not violating the environment as the world want us to, the world wants to believe. But we need to tidy our own background as well, because it's more important to our survival is our microclimatic setting, the small area in which we live. If we're able to sustain that, and every nation does that at a micro level, then we have a system that will work globally.
To reduce the threat posed by climate uncertainties on our agricultural productivity and food insecurity, we need to develop climate-resilient seeds, manage our water resources for efficient irrigation, protect our forest, improve grazing patterns, address soil degradation through better soil or moisture and vegetation conservation, and other efficient farming technologies and practices.
Populations of African countries are said to be predominantly lopsided in favor of youth, women and children, and the growth rate is also said to be about 2% compared to 1% in other places of the world. Therefore, if we must address the matter of sustainable development in Africa through climate change, it's important for us to address our population structure and rate of growth. Our next report is on the effects of our population growth and the structure on climate change.
Africa is the most vulnerable continent to the detriments and impacts of climate change. Women, children, and youths are the most vulnerable and marginalized groups, as they are the ones to suffer the greatest from the effects of environmental degradation.
The population is growing in a geometric proportion, whereas the resource base itself is dwindling. So the resource base is not increasing, it's the same thing. We are not even exploit what is already on the ground very well. It's not even in an efficient way. So we are beginning to see even the pressure in some areas, because some of the conflicts that you are seeing in Nigeria today, they are based on resource conflicts.
We have a very high percentage of young people, women, and children, in our population, especially in Nigeria. On the United Nations report as well, we know that the children and women are most affected by the impact of climate change.
Climate change is one of the most challenging threats to sustainable development in Nigeria. Majority of people in Nigeria are largely dependent on natural resources for their livelihood. Nigeria's population is categorized as fast-growing, youthful, and increasingly urbanized, while Africa's regional population is said to be growing at an annual rate of more than 2%, nearly twice the global average. Women are likely to suffer from the impacts of climate change more than the men due to their social roles. Besides increased feminization, poverty has reduced their adaptive capacities, among other reasons, to their comparative limited access to productive factors including land, technology, and credit. As a result, women are much more devastated by poverty and natural disasters than men.
Most women we know are engaged in agricultural work, in the rural area. Even in the urban area, they are the ones that are in charge of use of some of the energy, that we produce, as well. So these are some of the things that make it to affect them.
Definitely in this part of the world, the role of women, they fetch water, they fetch firewood and everything, and all these resource bases are dwindling and they're getting choked, so they're going to bear the brunt, and economically they are not strong.
Predominantly youthful age structure of the Africa and indeed Nigerian population must be considered within the context of climate change, given that children and youths are particularly vulnerable to long-term effects of climate change. Also, youths from ages 15 to 24 are among the vulnerable groups excluded in social development and in the environment and climate change negotiations. Their social exclusion is reflected in high unemployment rates exceeding 20% in some countries.
And there are a lot of structures on the ground that can really help us do this. Education is one area. People have been talking about educating the female child and all those things.
The threats of climate change on Africa's population growth rates and peculiar structure can be reduced by creating enabling environments that will make changes adaptive and beneficial to the African women, children, and the youths. These can be achieved through promotion of human rights and dignity, reduction of vulnerability to poverty and exclusion, provision of good health facilities, sound education, access to adequate food, clean water, and other resources, creation of jobs for the unemployed youths. The World Watch Institute, a World Environmental Research Institute, has, among other things, advocated that if all women have access to contraception and steps are taken to improve their lives, these should be among the key strategies in the fight against global climate change.
Climate change impacts such as flooding and erosion are displacing large populations and forcing people to leave their homes. Erosion is a major phenomenon that hinders economic growth and poverty reduction in a typically agrarian society. It is among the most significant consequences of climate uncertainty.
There is every compelling evidence to show that the impacts of humankind's development activities are heating up the planet, and one of the results of that is water levels have risen as a result, thereby leading to a major problem of our time. Erosion has been defined as the process of weathering and transportation of solids, that is, sediments, soil, rock, and other particles in the natural environments of source and deposition of them elsewhere.
Erosion, from the ordinary layman point of view, is just the washing away of the topsoil. Of course, there are stages from the ordinary sheets to the real, then before it becomes gully. It takes time, of course. So, of course, it's a function of rainfall, but not only rainfall, it's also contingent on the soil properties, or the type of soil you have.
What I would term as degrading manner, in a manner that is not good for the environment, in a manner that could be dangerous to livelihood and other human activities. But in Lagos, the kind of erosion we have, or the type of erosion we have, is most of coastal erosion as a result of ocean upsurge and wave activities along the coastline. So such as what we have in Bar Beach that is not being controlled by the permanent structure that the Lagos State government is putting there.
Researchers have revealed that the increasing incidence of erosion and its complementary impact is due to climate change. Climate change, or global warming as it is often called, has been brought about largely by human activities, especially industrialization, which has led to the release of more greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. The accumulation of these greenhouse gases in the atmosphere has depleted the ozone layers, which can no longer shield the Earth from direct access to the sun. This warming has therefore brought about the melting of polar ice and glacier into the oceans, which have become warmer and are also increasing in volume.
What we have known scientifically is that there's a continual rise in sea level, and if this continues to rise, what we can experience is, I hope not, a submerge of places like the Lagos Island, if care is not taken. So obviously, sea rise level is going to be a major problem if it's not curtailed.
The sea level, according to researchers, has risen by 10 to 20 centimeters in the past century. The effect of rising sea levels and the velocity of movement of waters in turn cause erosion. The more the sea level rises, the more area becomes vulnerable to erosion by running water. Climate change has grave effects on agricultural soil. For instance, if soil cover is depleted, vegetation cover will deplete, and this in turn affects the food source of humans. The hazards erosion also affect humans, especially those persons in the urban areas, destroying houses and livelihoods and affecting people and their areas of abode.
When erosion is starting from a small place, we can start planting trees. There are some grasses, cover grasses that one can plant and you stop erosion at the earliest stage. Also from that way, we advise Nigerians to cultivate the habit of going green.
Research have shown that engineering solution could be moving the problem from one location to the other. A solution that not only take care of the physical component of the environment as well as human components, the people themselves, something that will involve even the participants of the stakeholders. The stakeholder, not only the government, even the people, even the local people, the developers themselves who wants to come and invest in that environment. So all of us has to, we have to work together.
Others will include reforestation and construction of dikes, dams, reservoirs, floodway, that is, artificial channels that divert flood water.
Water is a scarce resource, but it is about the most important thing that sustains life. Its availability or scarcity and its proper harnessing and management are very important to reduce water crisis and the risk of impacts from climate variability and change. Even though Nigeria won this year's leadership role in international water policy in the West African sub-region, bringing to 20 the number of countries which have won the award, we need to do more to make clean water available to a large chunk of our population. Our next report focuses on water and the need to manage it properly for our benefit.
Water is the major constituent of living matter. From 50 to 90% of the weight of living organisms is water. Blood in animals and sap in plants consist largely of water and serve to transport food and remove waste material. It is obvious that water is indispensable and inevitable in humans' life. The role it plays cannot be measured. Almost everything in life depends on water in one way or the other. Man uses water for various domestic and industrial purposes such as drinking, washing, cooking, baking and brewing, and so on. About 71%, that is 3/4 of the Earth's surface, is covered with water. This, for instance, is Makoko, a community whose lives and livelihoods depend solely on water. Indeed, all life activities including housing, trading, schooling and healthcare services take place here. Despite the high percentage of water supply on Earth, man still finds it difficult to get access to water for domestic purposes.
When you have a shortage of rainfall, surface water, not only surface water decreases and groundwater recharge also decreases, so it becomes a problem for us to even get drinking water. You have an experience of what happens in so many other countries around north of Africa. Go to Ethiopia, go to Niger, so many things, so they have to dig a lot before to get water.
We need to put in place a mechanism that will make us to adjust, what we call adaptation, make us to adjust to the what is expected in terms of climate change with respect to the utilization of water and the provision of water supply.
What we need to do, as a nation, is to not react, but to start acting on issues. What we do often is to react. The situation comes and we quickly run in an emergency. But we don't need to run in an emergency. We need to look at the situation as it is on ground and see what can we do if this problem is going to be leading to more problem in the near future.
By the end of the 21st century, sea level is projected to rise another 28 to 58 centimeters if greenhouse gas emissions continue to increase significantly. Rising sea level will complicate life in many island and coastal regions. Storm surges, in which winds locally pile up water and raise the sea, will become more frequent and damaging. This is Agbowa Resettlement Camp. It is where Lagos State Government has relocated the victims of the recent Ajegunle town flood disaster.
We are here today because of the flood. We were living at Ajewole Street, Ajegunle. The flood was too much for us, and this is my third child. I had to take my other two children to my mother-in-law when the flood was intense.
It is a humanitarian job, and currently you can see our statistic. We have 1,009. Before it was, when we first came to the camp, it was 1,003.
Erosion of cliffs, beaches and dunes will increase. As the sea invades the mouth of rivers, flooding from runoff waters will also increase upstream.
And if you look at it globally, if you talk about the sea level rise, once the sea level rise, even just by 1 meter, is probably enough to submerge more than 50% of the coast of Lagos. Where we move all those people to? So it's a very big challenge.
Of recent, I don't know if you heard about what happened in places like Sokoto and these are not the areas where we ordinarily have expected erosion, to have take place, And as well as that, we know what happened around Ikorodu Road as well. Of course, maybe they said that was partly due to opening of the dam. But what I heard from the state where the dam was opened as well is that it is not the first time they are opening the dam. That is obvious. The opening of the dam may have been exacerbated by the level of rainfall at that particular point in time. So we are seeing the consequence of climate change as it were as well.
Small island cities such as Lagos, where the highest land is at best only a few meters above sea level, are already experiencing saltwater intrusion, which is making groundwater undrinkable. The negative impact of improper water management can begin with coastline dikes and levees and other barriers to block encroachment of the sea. Governments can also put in place proper structures to assist the populace to access clean water for drinking and other domestic uses.
On that note, we ended today on the first of a two-part introductory episodes of your program, Our Warming World, Going Beyond Green. If you join us next time, we will feature a number of other reports to draw your attention to the imperatives of the impacts of climate change on planet Earth and the need for all of us to begin to do some things, no matter how little, to adapt to the impacts of climate change. See you then.